financial experts.
If you were advising the President of the United States, what's the thing that he's not doing that he should do?
And lucky for you, we know a lot of science experts too.
You talked about those reagents which are necessary for the testing. It's also the behavioral psychological approach.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
A social distancing tip.
While the CDC urges you to avoid close contact, like hugging or shaking hands, there are other non-physical ways to say hello. Wave, wink, use sign language, salute, smile, give the peace sign, throw up an air high five, do jazz hands. Remember, stay a minimum of 6 feet or 2 arms length away from others, and stay home if you can. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #alone together. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Business is constantly evolving.
Working with government and National Rail, TfL has a plan to help London reopen carefully, safely and sustainably. We're in this together and you have a vital part to play. Continue working from home if you can. Avoid public transport to allow those that must use it to do so safely. Walk or cycle to work if you can. We're adding cycleways and widening pavements to help. If you must travel, travel off-peak, especially in the mornings. For those who must use public transport, it is now very different. Follow national social distancing measures of 2 meters wherever possible. Wear a face covering over your nose and mouth and wash your hands before and after travel. Our services are regularly cleaned with hospital-grade antiviral disinfectant for everyone's safety, and we're providing hand sanitizer across the public transport network to help reduce the spread of the virus. Thank you for your help. Search TfL's Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
2020 take you somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is,
or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
London on DAB Digital Radio. To New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chehich.
And I'm Roger Herring, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
So we're back online with UK equities. Roger, of course, they were closed yesterday for the bank holiday. Welcome back to anyone who wasn't listening yesterday because you were perhaps out enjoying the sun. If we take a look at equities today, you are seeing some clear risk on the screen. The Stock 600 fully back online. That's up 0.9% across regional equity benchmarks. The FTSE 100 moves higher by 1.9%. CAC 40 higher by 1%. The DAX higher by 0.7%. IBEX and FTSE MIB both higher by more than 1%. Of course, US equity markets were closed yesterday as well for Memorial Day. Futures point to quite a strong higher open. Dow, S&P and NASDAQ futures all up at least 1.7%. So all this risk on, despite the fact that the war of words continues between the US and China. It seems the risk assets at least very much more focused on the gradual reopening of economies around the world. The 10-year Treasury yield moves higher by almost 4 basis points towards a 70 handle. The 10-year Bund yield higher by almost 5 basis points, a negative 44. 10-year gilt yield moves up a basis point and a half. In FX, a weaker dollar reflects the risk-on sentiment as well. Pretty much all G10 currencies gaining against the dollar, led by commodity currencies. The yen is the only currency weakening against the dollar, which again really shows you how strong the risk-on trade is today. And that's reflected in oil as well. It's had an 80% rally this month. Today, WTI up 3.5%, $34.41 a barrel. Brent crude at $36.33, up 2.2%. Some signs perhaps that traders optimistic about a rebalancing in the market, but how much longer can a rally like this in oil last, Roger? There are still, of course, big question marks over global demand, even if the IEA says it's going to recover to pre-crisis levels.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch the oil market in the weeks and months ahead. Let's move on to some of today's top stories now. Here in England, outdoor markets and car showrooms will be able to reopen from June the 1st. That's if they can meet the virus guidelines to protect shoppers and workers. The government says other non-essential stores, including shops selling clothes, books and electronics, can reopen 2 weeks later from June the 15th if the spread of the virus is under control.
And sticking with the UK as well, and the political crisis, Boris Johnson facing another day of pressure to discipline his top advisor. Dominic Cummings has refused to quit over allegations he broke the government's virus lockdown rules. Members of Johnson's own Conservative Party had called on him to fire Cummings.
And in top corporate news, the French drug maker Sanofi is getting more firepower to invest in fast-growing fields such as cancer. It's selling a stake in Regeneron Pharmaceuticals valued at about $13 billion. The companies will continue to collaborate on drug research, and right now Sanofi shares just very fractionally lower, 0.18%.
And Germany is offering Lufthansa a €9 billion bailout. It thrusts the state back to the heart of a company it privatised 2 decades ago. The package involves an initial 20% stake, but that could rise to 25%, a blocking minority in the event of a hostile takeover. The plan needs EU approval and will almost certainly be challenged by rival airlines such as Ryanair. For more on this story, let's go live to Frankfurt, where Bloomberg's Richard Weiss is standing by. Richard, great to chat to you again. We were talking about this on TV yesterday, and now we do have some progress. So is this completely a done deal now? And if so, how will the bailout work exactly?
No, it still needs approval by Lufthansa's supervisory board. It needs approval by the European Commission, and then rivals will want their say. So these things are still pending and will take a couple more days. In the end, the government tried to square the circle by providing a sizable amount of equity, even though the share price was too low for the company to just go out and raise capital on the market, and not too much debt, so Lufthansa actually has a chance to repay it. So that was not an easy task. It's the biggest corporate bailout since this pandemic started, possibly the biggest when excluding banks and insurances during the subprime crisis a decade ago in Germany ever. And the 3 main parts of the package, it's not just equity, it's a little bit of equity, a 20% equity stake for 300 million, a 3 billion loan with participation of the state-owned KfW bank and also private banks, and a 5.7 billion silent participation, and that has elements of both equity and debt, and that helped the government to square that circle.
But Richard, I mean, we're talking about it as if, in a sense, it's a done deal. Of course, it isn't. The EU has to give its imprimatur to it. And also, of course, there could be legal challenges from people like Ryanair.
Absolutely, because we know the CEO of Ryanair, Michael O'Leary. He does talk a lot, and a lot of the things that he says sound provoking, and that's what they intended to do. But more often than not, he's right with what he says, and these things may have to stand up in court if O'Leary will go out and challenge it, and it has to comply with European Union laws. That's clear. So that is possibly another legal hurdle that this bailout package faces. The problem is governments help their airlines in different ways. In the UK, for example, it's been fairly easy to get money with little strings attached. The German government wants their say. They wanted this special, this complicated package, and it will have to stand up.
Yeah, and in terms of getting the approval of Brussels, I mean, one thing that Lufthansa might have to give up are landing slots in Frankfurt and Munich. They're said to be at issue, Richard. So I suppose my question then, if this is not a done deal right now, is are there any chances that this actually doesn't go through? Or what's the most likely scenario in terms of this going through and what the situation looks like for Lufthansa at the end of this?
The most likely scenario is that it will go through, but there could be some, if it's an MFA deal, we'll call it remedies, and that a typical thing would be that the airline has to give up slots. You know, the competitive authorities, they usually get nervous once an airline has, or once a company has a stake of about a share of about 40% in any given market. Now it's hard to argue for an airline what is the market. Is it the home market, for example, Frankfurt and Munich for Lufthansa, or the other airlines, other airports they fly to? Still, in an event like this where there's massive government intervention, they will probably take this as an opportunity to say, let's make sure nobody is too concerned about the domination of this company, and let's force the company to give up some slots. There's a good chance that that will happen. In terms of other consequences, I mean, this package immediately just adds about 300 million in equity, meaning the dilution for existing shareholders is fairly moderate at about 14%. That's a bit theoretical calculation based on the current share price. But, of course, it adds billions in extra debt, meaning Lufthansa is said to have a pretty high financial leverage in future. I've heard an analyst say this morning who said a few aspects of this package are less bad than feared, so to say. For example, an initial 4% interest rate on the silent participation and the absence of a fixed repayment date for it. The government said that it does not intend to exercise its voting rights that come with that stake, except if the company were to be taken over. So there's also an element in there to protect Lufthansa from a hostile takeover.
All right, Richard, thank you very much indeed. Richard Weiss there in Frankfurt talking about Lufthansa. Shares up over almost 6.5% now.
Let's get the world news with Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Good morning, Naira. Thank you. The Macau casino tycoon Stanley Ho has died at the age of 98 in Hong Kong. Known as the King of Gambling, Ho transformed the Chinese island into the Las Vegas of Asia. He fathered 17 children, and some of his family are now vying for control of his $15 billion empire. Hong Kong's leader has defended China's move to impose national security laws in the territory. Bloomberg's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
This is Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam hitting back. She's concerned about the international outcry and that the protests have kicked off again. She rejected foreign criticism, saying, well, that's just politicians with double standards. She says Hong Kong people actually support the legislation. But the issue here is that China refers to many of these demonstrators as terrorists and often says that the protests are about independence. And with this legislation, we would see mainland agencies operating here. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
In Spain, people in Madrid and Barcelona are entering a new phase as the lockdown begins to lift. From yesterday, people were able to sit outside at bars and restaurants, but capacity was capped at 50%. Bloomberg's Jeanette Newman reports.
Residents in Spain's two major cities could also meet with as many as 10 people in their homes. The latest step in Spain's gradual reopening, though, also laid bare the slog that lies ahead for many businesses. Only about 1 in 3 restaurants that has outdoor seating chose to open to clients. They stayed shuttered because they're worried about weak demand. In Madrid, Jeanette Newman, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
And the NHS wants more blood donors to come forward to support potentially life-saving trials. It's particularly looking for men aged over 35 who have recently recovered from COVID-19 after being treated in hospital. Consultant hematologist Professor Mike Murphy says convalescent plasma is what they are looking for. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Take the Bond Challenge. Use the free Interactive Brokers Bond Scanner to search their deep availability of U.S. government securities, 38,000 global corporate bonds, and 850,000 municipals. IBKR passes through the highest of all bids and lowest of all offers received at the electronic venues it accesses. We do not widen spreads, apply hidden fees, or mark up quotes. How many basis points does your current broker keep? Find out at ibkr.com/bonds.
Jenny Liss, Jewish communal leader and philanthropist, talks about why she chose the Jewish Communal Fund for her family's charitable giving.
For a lot of people, it would be the convenience factor. I don't have to track anything.
If charitable giving is an important part of your life, JCF can help you organize your philanthropy with our donor-advised fund. A fund can be established with a minimum tax-deductible contribution of $5,000. Make grants to your favorite charities, and JCF handles all the administration and reporting.
At the year end, our board awards community grants from fees and endowment income to UJ's annual campaign. We also make gifts to specific organizations, the elderly, Holocaust survivors, the hungry. The fact that we come together as a community at the end of the year to build community, that's what makes us different.
Get better at giving back. To find out more about JCF's impact, visit jcfny.org and download the Giving Report. JCF, we have a gift for giving.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. The best sports story all day, 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week. ESPN Daily.
Search ESPN Daily to listen.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
Kill O'Neal. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk off the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with a podcast on TuneIn. For expert analysis straight from the WWE to Steve Austin's no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen. Looking for your daily fix of NFL news and analysis?
In that. So we had to blow it up and do Super Bowl predictions instead.
Look no further than the Pick Six podcast, where CBS sports writer Will Brinson gets you up to speed with what's trending in the NFL that day, so that you're always in the know.
Yeah, it's pretty revealing of Brinson's methodology for predictions. When he gets mad at people for predicting good teams are going to win the Super Bowl or good players are going to win major awards. That's how you wind up.
Search Pick Six on TuneIn to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Now, there's green on the screen across European equity markets this morning. The FTSE leading gains, currently up 1.7% here in London. The Stock 600 gaining 0.8%, while the DAX is up 0.4%. US futures also pointing to a higher open. In stock specifics, I'm keeping an eye on Lufthansa gaining more than 4% in Frankfurt after that bailout was agreed by the German government. But Aston Martin Lagonda, that is really the outlier, surging more than 32% here in London on the back of the news that AMG head Tobias Moers has been named the new chief executive in a shake-up of top management there. So quite a key move. In currency markets, I am keeping a close eye on the yuan. Yesterday, Beijing set the rate at a 2008 low. The offshore currently holding around 7.14, while the onshore is at 7.13 against the greenback. The Bloomberg dollar spot index is weaker today, down 0.4%. The yen also down at 107.2. In turn, we are seeing almost all other G10 currencies gaining. Sterling up 0.5% at 122. The euro at 109. Aussie and Kiwi dollars rallying 0.7%, both really getting a boost, those commodity currencies. Yields in government bonds are also gaining today. The 10-year Treasury yield up 3 basis points to 69 basis points. 10-year bund yields gaining 5 basis points to negative 45. 10-year gilt yields at 19 basis points this morning. Finally, WTI crude gaining more than 3.5% after Russia pledged to trim oil supply by 10 million barrels a day. WTI at $34 a barrel. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Len Garens with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. The World Health Organization has temporarily halted tests on hydroxychloroquine in its coronavirus drug trials amid safety concerns. Members are suspending work after the Lancet Medical Journal published a study that said President Trump's touted medicine is linked to an increased risk of heart ailments. The WHO says tests may resume if new data warrants such a move. Now, in Europe, Italy's reported the fewest new coronavirus cases since February, as daily fatalities remained below 100 for a second day. Yesterday, 92 deaths were recorded compared to 50 the day before. A total of 32,877 people have died in Italy since the start of the pandemic. And drone technology is to be used to deliver protective equipment to a hospital on a Scottish island. The supplies will be flown to the islands of Argyll and Bute over the next 2 weeks. It's hoped the idea will speed up the time it takes to diagnose COVID-19 patients, and it could be rolled out across the UK if it's successful. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. That's interesting. So over the next 2 weeks, those supplies will be flown to islands in Argyll and Bute. I guess it could look promising.
It could do indeed. I actually didn't know where that was. I had to Google it, and now I have. It's really pretty. But let's see. Hopefully
somewhere
they'll have
to visit once we can get going, I suppose.
Yes, definitely. But it is interesting because now if drone technology works, we can get tests more promptly to different places that might have not had connections before.
Yeah, but drones are used for everything, of course, so why not? And I think I've certainly heard stories of delivering medicine in Africa, so perhaps that's a big new feature of the drone world.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Leanne Gerrans. With the world news now, let's continue with our guest for the rest of the hour, Marie Owens-Thompson, Group Chief Economist at Indosuez Wealth Management. Marie, great to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us today. And you join us when we're seeing quite strong risk appetite today. Following on from yesterday, of course, there was thin liquidity with the US and UK closed. But last week, we saw a weekly gain for global equities as well. And this all despite the fact we're seeing an escalation of the war of words between the US and China. It feels like markets are focusing much more on the reopening of global economies rather than on geopolitical tensions. As an economist, are you much more focused on that now as well? And is it giving you some optimism around the recovery?
Well, I think obviously, as everybody agrees, we're in a phase of unprecedented uncertainty, and it would just be hard to believe that we're going to improve in a straight line and in linear fashion with no setbacks from here. So, I think that we are happy to see that people are responding positively to these reopening measures, but we have to bear this uncertainty very clearly in our minds and understand that we're probably going to face some volatility going forward.
Maria, a lot's going to depend on demand, isn't it? I mean, that essentially is what's going to drive whatever happens. And we have seen in China that demand hasn't really kept up with the revival in manufacturing. And are we going to see that on a wider basis, do you think?
Yes, I think that there's going to be reticence on behalf of consumers to simply return to normal. And I must say that I would hope that that will be the case, because a crisis of these kinds of epic proportions surely needs to be put to good use. And this is a unique opportunity to change some of the economic models that we had in place that prior to this crisis that we sorely need improving. And this is a unique chance for consumers, perhaps, indeed, to use their power to vote with their feet, so to speak, and concentrate on the consumption that we all want to see going forward, a more sustainable model. I think the key word is resilience. We've all understood how essential that is to all our wealth and survival chances, and consumers have a key role to play in forcing the change in models towards greater resilience in the future.
Marie, it's a really, really interesting point you bring up, because I feel like you could fall on either side of this camp in that post-COVID, you do start to see a move towards some of these trends that were beginning to come to bear before COVID. However, you could also ask the question whether people will really move their focus that way if, even after a recovery and, say, a rebound in the third or fourth quarter, however strong that is, we end up with a world of lower growth, higher debt, and we actually don't get back to that pre-crisis level. People keep talking about the 90% economy. What's your view in terms of what this looks like post the next 3 months?
Yes, indeed. I mean, again, with these unprecedented margins of errors that we probably have in everybody's forecast, we're nevertheless looking for the activity level to perhaps recover to the 2019 level. This, we think, might happen towards the end of next year. And, of course, depending on any second waves and other setbacks to that hypothesis, it could obviously take until 2022 before we regain the 2019 level of activity. But I think clearly, for instance, of course, climate-related issues, and even the COVID crisis, obviously, these are issues that require a global response. And I would certainly hope that we all manage to take this opportunity to move in that direction, rather than think that we're just going to go back to normal when we have discovered that those economic models were not really protecting us in times of these kinds of, in order to face these big global challenges.
Yeah, because Marie, I mean, one of the big things there is oil, just to interrupt you, because that is key at the moment. And we are hearing from the Russians a suggestion that the market will be rebalanced even in June. The IEA saying that even demand could go above what it was before. But you think there are more fundamental changes?
Well, I would certainly hope so. And, so we have 197 countries that have signed the Paris Climate Agreement. And yet the world pays about 6.5% of global GDP on energy subsidies. And 85% of those energy subsidies actually do go to fossil energy subsidies. And this is, this eclipses even the amount that the world spends on education, which is about 5.9% of global GDP. So this is obviously completely incoherent. We cannot, on the one hand, say that we're going to try to reduce emissions, and then on the other hand, subsidize the source of energy that produces most of those emissions. So this is the unique opportunity to try to create some coherence around the policy responses to climate change and to resilience in general, to preparedness in general, so that we have a more immediate and coordinated response next time something like this happens.
Yeah. What do you expect in terms of oil demand, in terms of a comeback, though, Marie? Because Fatih Birol of the IEA was saying we could get back to pre-pandemic demand levels. And I suppose one of the arguments in favour of that is that people will be driving cars more if they don't want to take transport.
Yes, but I would think that those are short-term adjustments after all. And it just has to be the case that we reduce our consumption of fossil energies either way, so to speak. Either because policies make us do this as countries unite behind such an impulse, or arguably because of climate change that will sink many of these assets literally underwater and force a change in our consumption pattern. In that sense. So indeed, I agree with you, though. Of course, we know that cars are a main generator of CO2 emissions. But the transport pricing...
That's going to be a key issue in an area. Transport pricing, as you say, is going to be a vital part of that. Marie, thank you so much. Marie Owens-Thompson there, Group Chief Economist at Indo-Suez Wealth Management, joining us there on Daybreak Europe. Matt Miller is going to take over the next hour. This is Daybreak Europe. This is Bloomberg.
Working with government and National Rail, TfL has a plan to help London reopen carefully, safely and sustainably. We're in this together and you have a vital part to play. Continue working from home if you can. Avoid public transport to allow those that must use it to do so safely. Walk or cycle to work if you can. We're adding cycleways and widening pavements to help. If you must travel, travel off-peak, especially in the mornings. For those who must use public transport, it is now very different. Follow national social distancing measures of 2 meters wherever possible. Wear a face covering over your nose and mouth and wash your hands before and after travel. Our services are regularly cleaned with hospital-grade antiviral disinfectant for everyone's safety, and we're providing hand sanitizer across the public transport network to help reduce the spread of the virus. Thank you for your help. Search TfL's Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
TSB believe in people helping people. That's why they've created TSB Smart Agent, a new secure way for TSB to answer your personal and business banking questions online. Find out more at tsb.co.uk. Automated service available 24/7. TSB partners available 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday to Friday.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
The idea is to really hold the economy in suspended animation until we get control of this virus.
We are very much in a picture of monetary dominance.
We will get slower growth. Let's not get confused about that.
We are in a national crisis. I think it is for all parties to pull together.
The euro area is facing an economic contraction of a magnitude and speed that are unprecedented in peacetime.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning. I'm Matt Miller in the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio. And We got a little bit of a rally underway once again today. European stocks continue to gain. Those that were open yesterday showed some big gains. For example, the DAX was up almost more than 300 points, almost 3% to 11,400 or thereabouts. It's gaining the least today, but still up 0.6%. Others that were closed yesterday are playing a little bit of catch up. The UK was closed for some sort of bank holiday yesterday. To be honest, I still don't know what it was. But in the U.S., it was Memorial Day, where we honor those military personnel who fought and fallen for the country. So U.S. markets were closed. UK markets were closed. The continental European indexes were open and up. And now everything is back up again in Europe and a little bit of catch up in the UK. In terms of the U.S. futures picture, we're looking at strong gains, almost 2% gains on U.S. futures contracts. So it does look like it's going to be a risk-on scenario there in the U.S. today. I have an ace up my sleeve when it comes to talking about the UK and the U.S. My friend Anne-Marie Hortern is sitting in the studio in New York. She's a native New Yorker, but she normally lives in London. Anne-Marie, do you know what reason the UK had for not trading yesterday?
Yeah, it was a spring bank holiday, Matt.
Okay, cool. I love how they just grant themselves random bank holidays. I would do that if I were in charge as well. But now we're looking at the FTSE playing a little bit of catch up. The U.S. futures are up as well. There's a lot of optimism in these markets.
Yeah, there's a ton of optimism today. And if you look across the sector picture on the Stock 600, travel and leisure, Matt, is just on a tear, up 5 0.7%. And then if you dig deeper and look at the biggest movers overall, mostly the top 10 biggest ones are travel and leisure stocks. TUI up nearly 30%, IAG, Intercontinental Hotels, EasyJet. I mean, double-digit gains for all these companies. And we discussed this yesterday. Part of this is Lufthansa bailout from Germany. That going ahead, just waiting for the nod from the European Union. But also Germany looking to lift some of these warnings for 31 European countries in June. Spain as well is allowing tourism back this summer. So all of that is really just a glimmer of hope for these markets.
Yeah, travel and leisure stocks doing really well. And I wonder how the auto sector looks, Anne-Marie. Yesterday you were covering the Volkswagen story. That's kind of a down arrow story because the court ruled against them in terms of the diesel scandal. But today we have a new CEO for Aston Martin. Listeners may not know that you're kind of into cars. Could you see yourself in a DBX?
I'm not as into cars as you are, Matt, but I do like cars. Even though I'm a terrible driver, but I'm an excellent co-pilot. I definitely could see myself in any Aston Martin. Yeah, I could.
I'm probably a terrible driver, but I would never admit it. That's the edge you have over me. So Aston Martin has a new CEO coming from AMG. Of course, Mercedes has a big investment in Aston Martin, I think about 5%, at least 5%. So that's an interesting story. Andy Palmer stepping down. Volkswagen, I guess it's not as bad as expected, right? Yesterday we got that ruling, but the shares didn't get hit that hard.
Yeah, and the shares are up today as well. But this is just, I think, more investors are dealing with more of this Dieselgate scandal. But what's interesting about this story, and Matt, we spoke about this yesterday, is the fact that Volkswagen will have to pay these customers who bought a used diesel car that was fitted with those illegal emission technology. I'm pretty sure part of this case, though, is that they'll have to take for what it's worth now, basically considering the mileage that was used on it. But this is just, more woos in the Dieselgate scandal for VW.
Yeah, actually, they had a 12-cylinder. It wasn't a V12. It was a W12 diesel engine that I totally wanted. I never ended up getting it because even for me, it felt a little bit too dirty. But now, looking back, I could have picked it up and then returned it for cost, basically, minus the kilometers that I would have put on it. Anne-Marie, thanks so much for joining us. Anne-Marie Hortern there out of New York City. Let me get over right now to Chris Ralph. He's a chief global strategist at St. James Place Wealth Management, joining us in the studio after being on television earlier. Sorry, joining us on radio after being on television earlier. He hasn't come into the studio. You're still locked down at home, Chris?
I most definitely am, Matt, yeah.
You're staying at home, so no trips to Durham for you or to any castles in the region?
No trips to Durham or 30 miles to test my eyesight.
I'm sure you could make up some excuse if you had to, and then make it super complicated so that we found it difficult.
But the great thing is that we can all use that as an excuse for just about doing anything these days.
Yeah. Well, you definitely can if you're a senior advisor to the Prime Minister. You can do whatever you want. What are you doing these days in terms of your job as Chief Global Strategist? Where do you see the best or the most opportunity?
Well, what I'm trying to do is trying to do two things: trying to look at where the value and opportunity is in markets, and trying to assess. And we were talking earlier on Bloomberg TV about the opportunity in value as opposed to growth, the challenges of how quickly and how fast the FANG stocks are moving forward, and how much of the rest of the markets that's leaving behind. But then I think the other aspect here is trying to think through the sort of second order consequences of coronavirus, and in that there's what happens to ESG? Is ESG still at the centre of the way in which the industry, and particularly the fund managers that we speak to, are thinking about, and what happens to economies as they come out of a recession? Will that lead them into a different perspective than they were going into it?
You taught me kind of a new acronym that I wasn't even aware of, FANGMAN, which is Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, Microsoft. Did I miss one? What's the other A?
You missed NVIDIA.
NVIDIA.
And Apple, in fact.
And I feel like there are two A's for sure. There's Amazon and
Apple and
Apple, of course. Apple, yes, for sure. They've had such an incredible run. Can that continue on? I mean, surely they're services that we all use, and no one doubts the global dominance of these companies. But is that already priced in?
I mean, it is really difficult to say. And actually, we should credit your colleague, John Althers, the excellent columnist that Bloomberg have for the FANGMAN acronym. But in one of his recent columns, he said that the market capitalization of FANGMAN stocks, those that we just mentioned, is now greater than the whole of the German market capitalization. And you were just talking about a company like Volkswagen, and there's a huge plethora of other wonderful German businesses. It sort of seems a bit bizarre that both the German stock market and all the wonderful businesses within it could be valued so lowly, and yet at the same time companies like Facebook and Amazon and Google, etc., can be valued so highly. That leads me to think two things. Firstly, that there's absolutely no room for disappointment in the FANGMAN stocks, and at the same time, if one's prepared to look through the short-term noise of what's going on in Europe today, the opportunity in accessing European shares, I think you were showing the price to book chart earlier, Matt, looks really, really compelling on a 5 to 10 year view.
Yeah, I can't get over that chart. I mean, the markets are ascribing so much more value to U.S. stocks, and I get why. What do you think about the European structure in terms of a recovery? The U.S. has it easier in the way it's federally set up, right? They can just say, boom, here's $3 trillion. In Europe, it's much more difficult. Who has to pay for it? Obviously, some countries have money, others perpetually do not. Is that changing now with the Merkel-Macron agreement on the recovery fund? Do you have more confidence in Europe?
I think it potentially is, and Merkel and Macron have taken the first steps towards it. I was just before we came on air, I was reading an article that was entitled "Fiscal Mutualization." So it's the idea of the EU state issuing bonds rather than individual member countries, which actually overcomes one of the great challenges that the EU had, that it was this collection of separate countries that didn't have the fiscal union, had monetary union in the Eurozone, but didn't have fiscal union. And if this move by Macron and Merkel to create the recovery fund does create that fiscal union, then that will lead to a more harmonious ability to make decisions. Now, I'll pause before I said harmonious, because obviously you've got the frugal four, Austria, Netherlands, Sweden and Denmark, who are sort of saying, well, actually, we don't want to give countries like the Mediterranean countries of Greece, Spain, Italy, grants. We want to give them loans. But at the end of the day, it is perfectly conceivable that those loans could be translated into grants at some point in the future. So maybe this is a line in the sand, and maybe this is a point where Europe, ex-UK obviously, now joins more closely together and does create a very compelling trading bloc, which is a great argument for the benefits of European stocks medium to longer term.
Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. Chris, it's been great having you on with us today on both television and radio. Thanks very much for your time. Chris Ralph is Chief Global Strategist at St. James's Place Wealth Management. Now let's get over to Leanne Gerrans with your global news headlines. Leanne?
Good morning, Matt. Let's start here in the UK, where most shops across England can start planning to reopen in under 3 weeks, as long as they stick to new distancing rules. The Prime Minister said last night that non-essential retailers, from independent shops to department stores, can resume trading from the 15th of June. Outdoor markets and car showrooms will be able to reopen from June the 1st.
These are careful but deliberate steps on the road to rebuilding our country. And we can only take these steps thanks to what we have so far achieved together.
Johnson also urged the public to go out and spend money in stores when the curbs are indeed lifted. He said the government hoped to get the economy to bounce back in the months ahead. Now, staying in the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson's most senior advisor is refusing to quit or even apologise. Dominic Cummings has dismissed claims that he flouted lockdown rules that he himself actually helped to write. Cummings yesterday confirmed he drove more than 250 miles to Durham seeking childcare support for his son. The Prime Minister has continued to back his advisor but expressed regret for the pain the episode has caused. Now, Hong Kong's leader Carrie Lam has defended China's move to impose security laws on the city ahead of looming protests. Bloomberg's Karen Lee says this comes as international concern grows over what it would mean for the financial hub's autonomy.
Lam said residents support the legislation while rejecting criticism from foreign governments. She also said karaoke parlors and nightclubs shuttered as part of measures to contain the coronavirus would reopen after May 28th, with airport transit service gradually resuming from June 1st. In Hong Kong, Karen Lee, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start?
Hi, I'm Joan London with A Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, A Place for Mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
Our next guest says that Australia mustn't waste its once-in-a-generation opportunity to reform the economy. Deloitte Access Economics lead partner Christian Colding joins us now. In what ways would you hope that the Prime Minister and his cabinet would put forward new policies in this post-pandemic era?
I think it's important to consider speed in particular and jobs in particular. We are still very much in the midst of a significant recession. And so any immediate reform agenda should focus on how we get out of this current crisis. In doing so, I particularly like to focus on, I think it's job maker that he's calling it. So focus on reskilling and retraining people to make sure that we target the unemployment rate and get that down as soon as possible. From another perspective, it's going to be very important that we do put through some serious demand side stimulus in the next 6 months or so to really support the recovery. In doing so, I particularly like the opportunity to invest in more local and smaller pieces of infrastructure upgrades. Now, that could very well be through local councils. The important thing is that it is job-creating infrastructure upgrades at the local level, which is going to be able to be very neatly place-based and also deployed rapidly so that we can recover from the current crisis.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York City. I'm Anne-Marie Durham with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. It is a risk-on day today in the equity markets across Europe. We do have the UK and the US markets back open today after yesterday's public holidays. The stock 600 up more than 1%. A lot of price actions, these travel and leisure stocks. That sector is up 5 0.8% this morning. We have news coming out of Germany of a potential plan to lift travel warnings, as well as Spain this weekend. Also, in July, they're going to be allowing international travel. All of this really boosting those shares. U.S. equity futures are also pointing to a higher start in New York. S&P 500 futures up 1 0.8%. In foreign exchange this morning, we're seeing a firmer British pound, 1.22 against the U.S. dollar, as well as a firmer euro, 1.09, but a weaker Bloomberg dollar index down nearly 0.5%. And in commodities, crude is trading just north of $34 a barrel. That's WTI. This comes as Fatih Birol, the head of the IEA, said demand will come back. We have yet to reach peak oil demand, a big debate going on in the energy market. And then in the bond market this morning, the U.S. 10-year yield up 3.6 basis points, spot 6.9% on the 10-year yield. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Leanne.
Good morning, Anne-Marie, and thank you. The Macau casino tycoon Stanley Ho has died at the age of 98 in Hong Kong. Known as the king of gambling, Ho transformed the Chinese island into the Las Vegas of Asia. He fathered 17 children from 4 different women, and some of his family are now vying for control of his $15 billion empire. Now, the World Health Organization has temporarily halted tests on hydroxychloroquine in its coronavirus drug trials amid safety concerns. Members are suspending work after the Lancet Medical Journal published a study that said President Trump's touted medicine is linked to an increase of heart ailments. The WHO says tests may resume if new data warrants such a move. And finally, Japan's Prime Minister has warned it's not certain the Tokyo Olympics will go ahead next year, even after a 12-month delay. Shinzo Abe says recovery will need to happen in Japan and in the rest of the world, but he insists the government hopes to hold the games in a complete form platform were spectators of proof over COVID-19. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Therese Raphael, who's writing about the furor surrounding Dominic Cummings. The top aide to the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has refused to resign after he broke the virus lockdown rules. I've been noticing lately, Therese, everybody's saying allegedly broke lockdown rules. But yesterday he said himself that he went on a drive up to Durham, went to a castle, took another 30-minute drive just to test out like his eyesight or something. What's the story?
Well, I think there's a central confusion here between the lockdown slogan, which was really clear and unequivocal. You must stay at home, Boris Johnson said, and only essential outings and all of that, and the actual rules and guidance, which was a little bit more nuanced, which provided exceptions for extraordinary circumstances, for protecting the vulnerable. And so a lot turns on whether you think a 4-year-old child whose parents are taken ill and possibly very ill is vulnerable, and then what you think is permissible for parents to do in that situation. And as you can see, it's really divided the country. So many think that he ought to have stayed in London and found childcare then, or just sort of braved it out.
But hang on, Therese, not everybody knows what the deal is. So he's saying that he and his wife were either very ill or at risk of becoming very ill. So they decided the best plan would be to put their 4-year-old child in a car and then drive 250 miles to their parents' place.
Right. So his wife had was already displaying symptoms, and I think he had reasonable cause to think that he was also going to be ill. And
didn't he say he could barely see?
No. Okay. So that was 2 weeks later. So they drove 250 miles to County Durham, where his parents were. They sheltered on the estate of his parents, not with them apparently, in a separate place. And the child, and they did not endanger the parents or other family members. And then once he had recovered and the doctor had declared that he could go back to work, this was now Easter Sunday, which happened to also be his wife's birthday, they were considering driving back to London, but he said that one of the effects of the illness was that his eyesight felt off. And so his explanation is that they took a 30-minute drive to this area, this natural, beautiful area where this castle is, to sort of check things out. Now, I mean, you could see the problem with that, right? So you put the child in a car and drive 250 miles to protect the child, but then when your eyesight is not quite right, you put the child back in the car to test your eyesight. So that's not gone down very well. But, at the same time... Well,
that's what I do when I'm worried about my eyesight. I put a child in the car and then drive 30 miles to test it.
And then you do... if we
I wonder what he does when he's drunk, Does he say, I'm not sure if I've had too much scotch, put the kid in the car, let's go for a ride?
Well, Twitter is having predictably a great time with that. But the question really is, has he done enough? It was an apology that wasn't quite an apology. It was a sort of, I understand why this is controversial, and yet, I feel I've done the right thing by my family and I haven't broken any rules, and the Prime Minister of the country is standing by him. And I think the question is, what's the long-term or short-term damage here? Has he kept his job? If he has, at what cost? So those are the kinds of things that are now being chewed over endlessly.
Is it a problem, Therese? I mean, it's all interesting, but is it really a problem if British people think that people in the Johnson administration are lying? Is that not something that they already are comfortable with?
So I think it's the problem on two fronts. One problem is a question of credibility credibility with the government's message. So if people think that the government can violate its own lockdown restrictions, why should they abide them? And then... You know
what I'm going to do? I'm going to tell viewers to type in OPIN GO, or listeners type in OPIN GO on the Bloomberg to get the rest of your take. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. The NFL is considering adding a booth umpire and a senior technology advisor to the referee to assist the officiating crew. The league also is looking at other rules changes, including an alternative to the onside kick. Owners will vote on the proposals at the upcoming league meeting to be held by video conference this Thursday. The league's competition committee told teams last month it supports studying ways to determine how officiating personnel who have access to a video feed could help on-field officials. A booth umpire would serve as an eighth game official. The league is also considering making permanent the expansion of automatic replay reviews to include scoring plays and turnovers negated by a foul. Snooker will become the first pro sport to return to Britain with an 11-day free-to-air televised tournament to begin on June 1st. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
What happens next? When a downturn looms, shareholders turn to the C-suite to maintain profitability. And for 2 decades, the leaders of Fortune 500 and Global 2000 companies have turned to GEP for results. GEP's procurement and supply chain solutions help reduce costs, improve performance, and boost EBITDA. GEP helps great companies stay on track and primed for the next phase of the business cycle. GEP, helping the world's best companies do better.
Imagine.
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the Bloomberg office in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio. It is 10:30 here, 9:30 in the UK, 4:30 a.m. in New York. If you're awake, good morning and good for you. The early bird often catches the worm. The worm today could be gaining in value. Dow Jones, S&P, and NASDAQ 100 E-mini futures are all up about 2%. So it looks like a risk-on Tuesday. Of course, yesterday was a Memorial Day holiday in the U.S. and in the U.K. It was a holiday yesterday as well, just because. And so there was no trading there. Today, they're playing a little bit of catch-up, as the U.S. is expected to as well. The FTSE is up right now 1.9%, a little over 112 points to 6105. The CAC and the DAX are gaining as well. DAX not quite as much, about 0.7% today, but the DAX was up almost 3% yesterday, so it had a stellar Monday. The CAC and the IBEX are each up almost 1.5%, the IBEX 35 in Madrid. The FTSE MIB in Milan is up about 1.25%. So decent gains across Europe, and we're seeing, once again, the price for safe haven assets, for example, gold, falling. Gold trading for $1,727.41 a troy ounce. It's down about 0.25% or $4.50. We see no bid for treasuries. Investors feel comfortable enough letting the paper go. The yield right now is 0.69%. In terms of currencies, let's give you a quick look. You can buy 107.8 yen for your dollar. The greenback gaining strength against the Japanese currency. The euro losing strength against the dollar at 109.39. Gaining strength against the dollar at 109.39, and the pound up against the greenback as well at 122.61. Finally, a check on oil prices. We're looking at $36.10 for a barrel of Brent crude today, and then NYMEX WTI is trading for $34.18. So both the Brent and the NYMEX contracts are gaining today. Pretty decent gain on NYMEX crude, 2.8%, 92 cents to 34.17 a barrel. All right, so that's your data. We check it for you every 15 minutes. Let's get over to the top story now. Kind of the second day in a row for this to be the top story. Our Bloomberg News editor, Benedict Kammel, senior editor, joins us out of Berlin. And Benny, Germany is offering a 9 billion euro bailout. We knew this was going to happen, but now I guess the story is which concessions the EU demands in order to approve the package.
That's right. So the devil is in the details. This is a deal that won't just sort of be waved through by Brussels. They want to make sure that there is some semblance of an even playing field that's maintained. This is off the back of fairly sort of vocal criticism from some other airlines, notably Ryanair, but also EasyJet and others have said that you can't just sort of bail out one airline in one country and let the others sort of wither. So this is something that the EU is taking a close look at, and the one tool that they have at their disposal is looking at slots. You know, will Lufthansa have to give up some slots in Frankfurt and Munich and give these to other airlines? That's a very valuable currency. So obviously there's some resistance on the Lufthansa side to make this happen, but really Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, who helped broker this deal, she may have to give in if she doesn't want to see this deal collapse, because there's not a lot of time to lose here. The airline is in acute distress, and they need the money, so the longer this drags out, the more complicated for the company.
And she can't really afford to allow it to collapse, right? I mean, airlines... you've been covering this industry for years. This isn't a level playing field industry. Let's be honest, right? Germany needs to have its own national flagship carrier, and there are a lot of jobs at stake.
Yes, I mean there's jobs. There's also sort of a national notion of having as you say, a national carrier. That's important. You want Lufthansa as an emblem of German efficiency, ideally, but also a business that carries people abroad and brings them back here. You really need a local airline. It's why Italy still holds on to Alitalia. It's why most countries still have national carriers. You could say, well, low cost can take care of the local business, and then companies like Emirates can take care of the long haul. But no, there's a really sizable political component here. There's also jobs attached, as you said. Frankfurt Airport employs 70,000 people. That is next to Volkswagen's main factory, the biggest employer in the country, the biggest employment hub. And if Lufthansa were to disappear or were to come back as a much smaller company, that would have a huge knock-on effect on a place like Frankfurt or a place like Munich. So really, there's that big political and job component baked into this.
Yeah, I mean, for the sake of your economy, you've got to be able to guarantee that workers can travel around the country. And let's be honest, you can't do that on the Deutsche Bahn, right? Unless you have loads of time, because Lufthansa, at least, they're like the picture of efficiency compared to the Deutsche Bahn. Non-Germans don't know that the Deutsche Bahn doesn't run on time almost as a principle. In terms of these slots that Lufthansa would have to give up in Frankfurt and Munich, why are they so important? Who would they go to? What's the story there?
Well, they would probably go to rivals like Ryanair, like EasyJet. EasyJet has made some real inroads here in Germany and in Berlin, where we're both based. In Tegel, the airport, they started flying out of that airport. And this is a legacy of the collapse of Air Berlin that happened in 2017. And slots are really the currency of airlines. If you have a good, attractive morning slot into a very sort of constrained airport, that's really worth its weight in gold. And if you have to give that up and give it to somebody else, you lose that advantage. So Lufthansa will probably try and cling to the most attractive slots as best as it can, but this is not a company that can really make any demands. So it would most likely go to companies like Ryanair, like EasyJet, and they've really seen their business grow quite a bit here in Germany, and they obviously still want to expand.
Tegel was my favorite. Tegel, I have to say, my second favorite airport of all time after Tempelhof.
Well, the bad news is it's closing down. No.
Yeah, true. True. It's no good anymore to be conveniently located and to be easy to use. An airport has to be at least an hour away from the city, and it has to take an hour for you to walk from the gate, from the check-in to your gate. So I guess Berlin is following in the footsteps of Munich, and I guess Frankfurt will be the easiest one to use now that we have in Germany. Stuttgart's pretty good, too. Benny, thanks so much for joining us. Benedict Kamel, Bloomberg News senior editor, coming to us from his home office in Saelendorf. Let's get over now to Leanne Gerrans with the World National News headlines. Leanne?
Matt, good morning and thank you. Let's start with some breaking news. Junior Minister Douglas Ross has resigned over the government's response to Dominic Cummings' trips during lockdown. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson is facing another day of pressure to discipline his most senior advisor, Dominic Cummings. In a press conference at Downing Street yesterday, Cummings refused to apologise despite allegations that he broke the government's lockdown rules.
I don't regret what I did. As I said, I think reasonable people may well disagree about how I thought about what to do in these circumstances, but I think that what I did was actually reasonable in these circumstances.
The main charge against Cummings is that he ignored the government's own rules when he drove more than 250 miles to seek childcare support for his son. The Prime Minister has continued to back Cummings, but he said he regretted the pain and anger the episode has caused. Now, in Hong Kong, Chief Executive Carrie Lam has defended China's new sweeping national security laws. Lam says it's untrue the legislation would ban street protests. She promised that Hong Kong's freedoms would be preserved. Pro-democracy groups are planning another major rally tomorrow. Now turning to Japan, Shinzo Abe has lifted the virus emergency. The Prime Minister also told a news conference that reviving an economy sinking into recession was now the top priority. Bloomberg's Isabel Reynolds has more.
His government is set to approve a second massive economic rescue package on Wednesday, which, with a previous package approved last month, will add up to nearly $1.9 trillion. The government will also start to remove restrictions on businesses, aiming for a complete reopening in August. In Tokyo, Isabel Reynolds, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And the World Health Organization has temporarily halted tests on hydroxychloroquine in its coronavirus drug trials amid safety concerns. Members are suspending work after the Lancet Medical magazine published a study that said President Trump's touted medicine is linked to an increased risk of heart ailments. The WHO says tests may resume if new data warrants such a move. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Leanne, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let's take a break.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt US Kids, and the Ad Council.
The Boston Symphony Orchestra presents BSO at Home. While you stay inside, enjoy a curated collection of archived concerts and behind-the-scenes stories from BSO musicians. BSO Homeschool provides lessons for music lovers of all ages. New performances and messages from musicians are added regularly. Enjoy these selections and much more at bso.org/at-home.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's BABBEL.com.
Debbie Hart is president of BioNJ, which
at Moonpig, we've got making people happy down to a science. How? With flowers. Research shows that whether small blossoms or giant blooms, roses or peonies, receiving bouquets of any formation causes our bodies to produce endorphins, or the happy chemical. Thank you, Professor. And you too can harness the power of flowers with Moonpig. It's easy. Send a beautiful hand-tied bouquet of happiness straight from our app with just a couple of taps. Heartfelt can happen anywhere with Moonpig.com.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There are going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
Rise to the 5! Touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your 7th inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like,
of course.
Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, What do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is, we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one, not only.
Catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. Looking for your daily fix of NFL news and analysis?
In there. So we had to blow it up and do Super Bowl predictions instead.
Look no further than the Pick Six podcast, where CBS sports writer Will Brinson gets you up to speed with what's trending in the NFL that day, so that you're always in the know.
Yeah, it's pretty revealing of Brinson's methodology for predictions. When he gets mad at people for predicting good teams are going to win the Super Bowl or good players are going to win major awards. That's how you wind up.
Search Pick Six on TuneIn to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. The best sports story all day, 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week. ESPN Daily.
Search ESPN Daily to listen.
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown to a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen. With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunningham to Fiala. He scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic game replays to start listening.
Use 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York City. I'm Anne-Marie Horder with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Risk on sentiment this morning. U.S. equity futures pointing to a higher start in New York. S&P 500 mini futures up 1.8%. In Europe this morning, we are seeing green arrows to the upside across all the major indices. The stock 600 is up 0.9%. Travel and leisure is the standout, up 6% this morning. This comes as the DPA is reporting that Germany is looking to lift travel warnings. Also over the weekend, Spain talking about domestic travel being back in June and international in July. And then in the UK, some businesses will be back up and running June 1st. So a lot of optimism for that sector. In foreign exchange this morning, we do have a stronger British pound against the US dollar, 1.22, as well as a stronger euro, 1.09, but a weaker US dollar. The Bloomberg Dollar Index is down 0.5% this morning. In commodities, Brent WTI crude, is trading $34 a barrel. Fatih Bureau of the IEA says demand has yet to peak, so more consumption still to come. And in the bond market this morning, the U.S. 10-year yield is up 3.1 basis points, spot 6.9%, and Boons this morning also, those yields up 5.1 basis points, negative 0.44%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Leanne.
Good morning, Anne-Marie, and thank you. The Macau casino tycoon Stanley Ho has died at the age of 98 in Hong Kong. Known as the King of Gambling, Ho transformed the Chinese island into the Las Vegas of Asia. He fathered 17 children from 4 different women, and some of his family are now vying for control of his $15 billion empire. The first human trial of a vaccine in the Southern Hemisphere has begun today in Melbourne. The vaccine being tested was made by US company Novavax. It will be tested on a group of 130 healthy adults, with the first results expected in July. There are more than 100 vaccines being developed around the world, and around a dozen have begun human testing. And a test launch of Richard Branson's Virgin Orbit rocket has failed on its first attempt. The company was trying to get a satellite into space. The rocket was successfully released over the Pacific Ocean from a specially modified jumbo jet, but the mission then had to be aborted. It's not known exactly what went wrong just yet. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Matt.
Man, Elon Musk is really dominating this private space race, isn't he?
He is indeed, and he is really trying to get people into space. Doesn't he have a test flight with 2 quite shortly?
Yes, and then he's flying Tom Cruise out to the ISS.
I've always wanted to go to space. I keep on saying this. If someone's out there and they want to send me to space...
Would you go with Tom Cruise?
No, I don't like Tom Cruise that much.
What? We can't be friends anymore. Leanne Gerrans, thank you very much for that. Let me get over to Nathan Hager in the U.S. preparing for Bloomberg Daybreak. Nathan, are you a Cruise fan?
I've enjoyed the occasional Tom Cruise. I love Top Gun.
Dude, every Tom Cruise movie is great.
Yeah. I mean,
Gun is a classic.
There are a couple misses, but we won't talk about those right now. I wasn't a big fan of Edge of Tomorrow, but
loved it.
Really?
I can't think of anything he's done that I didn't like, to be honest, right now.
Loved him in Tropic Thunder.
Tropic Thunder was his best role.
Absolutely.
All right, Minority Report, one of our production people points out, Minority Report was awesome. You couldn't stop thinking about that for days after you... Anyway, okay, I digress here.
Right.
Tom Cruise is not on your show today.
Sadly, no. He would be a good guest for tomorrow, though, when they do have that SpaceX launch tomorrow.
Who have you got today?
We have Patrick Plurimi of Patrick Armstrong of Plurimi Wealth.
He's awesome.
At Invesco.
I love him.
Yeah, a couple of financial top guns with us on the show this morning as we come back from the holiday into this risk-on market with businesses reopening, coronavirus cases appearing to be leveling off some, and several positive developments in the vaccine race. But we still have those simmering tensions between the U.S. and China, so we'll sort all that out with our guests this morning, as well as Karen Moscow and I get things started on a holiday-shortened trading week on Bloomberg Daybreak. Hope you'll join us for it, Matt.
I always like to hear Patrick Armstrong sometimes has some real contrarian views, and he really puts his money where his mouth is. So I love to hear what he's doing, where he's putting his money right now. So I look forward to listening to Patrick Armstrong from Plurimi Wealth coming up on Daybreak with Nathan and Karen. If you're listening, if you're tuned in on Sirius XM channel 119, you'll hear that. If you're tuned in on London DAB digital radio, you will hear Surveillance. And it's a special day for Surveillance. Today kicks off, I think there's going to be 5 hours of Surveillance from now on, starting with Fran's hour, then it moves to Fran, then Tom joins her, so Fran and Tom. And now today, then they're moving to 3 people at the end of the program. Tom is joined by John Farrow and Lisa Abramowitz, and they're simulcasting radio and TV, which is my favorite way to... I've always loved the radio TV simulcast. So look forward to that special, the kickoff of the new surveillance format today. Let's get on back to markets. Stocks are rising, yields are climbing, despite concerns over geopolitical risks growing in the U.S.-China relationship, and obviously the continued concerns about the destruction of the economy from the pandemic lockdown. John Norman, head of cross-asset fundamental strategy at JP Morgan, joins us right now. And John, what do you think about, are we not pricing in the collapse of the U.S. or further deterioration, I should say, of the U.S.-China relationship?
I don't think we are. If you look at how markets are priced, they're priced as if the path of stocks and credit and commodities will solely be driven by economic recovery. It's a recovery that's going to be uninterrupted over the next few quarters, whether that's by data stumbles or by geopolitics. I think that's somewhat optimistic.
What about the recovery from this coronavirus lockdown? Do you think it's going to be as vigorous as prices are pointing to, or am I reading that wrong?
No, I think it would be incredibly strong, at least over the next 3 months. It could be very strong over the next 6 months because the starting point for activity is next to no activity. So just in growth rate terms, what you're going to see over the next quarter or two is going to be probably unlike anything you've ever seen before in terms of the upside. I think the difficulty is thinking about what happens 6 months from now if the unemployment rate is off the highs, but it's still at 15%. If corporates' defaults have peaked, but corporate spending is very weak because corporate balance sheets are weak. I think that's where you have to have more questions around the momentum and asset prices. So I'm not so much worried about the next 1 month or so because the data I think are going to be very strong. I'm much more concerned about kind of the past 6 months from now as we start to deal with some of these payback issues.
So I could see now being a great argument for active fund management rather than the passive that we've seen dominate more recently. Is that your call, John?
I think that's fair because if you're talking about a world where the economic dynamics are very uncertain, if you're also talking about a world where you've got scope for these geopolitical shocks, and if you recognize that different asset classes have different sensitivity to the strength of the recovery, it definitely argues for being choosy, and also it argues for being opportunistic around moves in and out of certain asset classes, and that's really what tactical asset allocation is.
Where do you think the best opportunities lie right now?
I think if you're focused only on the next 1 month, maybe the next 3 months, I think the opportunity is in anything geared towards a cyclical boom, because that's what you're going to see coming out of the deep recession, and that means some industrial names within equities. It means equities much more so than bonds. Commodities will probably be swept up in this as well, but that's a view for the next 1 month. If you're thinking about the next 3 to 6 months, I think credit has the best risk reward. If you're in any kind of environment where there's uncertainty about the vigor of the recovery, but you recognize that interest rates are going to be very stable and corporates will be managing their balance sheets more conservatively, that's really about credit. And if you're focused on the next 12 months, I think you stick with equities. I do think in the next 12 months you can see something that qualifies as a breakthrough on the vaccine front, and that's going to make investors a lot more optimistic about getting back to normal behavior by corporates and households over the long term. And that's something that you take exposure to much more so in stocks than in other asset classes.
All right, John, great having you with us here on radio. This has been brief, but I know you're going to stick with us because you're going to join the surveillance crew next. So anybody who wants to hear more from John, well, if you're tuned in on London on DAB digital radio, you can just leave it. You can just stay put because you'll hear John joining Tom Keene and Francine Lacroix next on Bloomberg Television. That is already simulcast on London DAB. If you're in the U.S. or if you're elsewhere, you can just flip over to the television. If you have a Bloomberg terminal in front of you, you can just type TV Go to get more from John Norman, head of cross-asset fundamental strategy at JP Morgan. Otherwise, if you're listening on Sirius XM, good morning to you. You'll hear from Patrick Armstrong from Plurimi Wealth next on Daybreak out of New York. This is Bloomberg.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus symptoms and testing. If you have any one of the following symptoms, a high temperature, a new continuous cough, loss of taste or smell, you can now get tested. Do not leave home for any reason other than to get tested. Find out how to get a test and how long to isolate at nhs.uk/coronavirus. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Whoa, just got a Moonpig reminder that it's your birthday Saturday.
Yeah, I set that up.
Oh, do you know what? I forget one time. Okay, I'm in the app.
Oh, the romantic card section.
I'm full of surprises. Now, what rhymes with babe?
How about just uploading a nice pic? No, wait, I'm not ready.
Hey, I love you from every angle. Now for the gifts. Oh, and flowers.
Heartfelt can happen anywhere with Moonpig.com. Download the app now.
The Woj Pod with Adrian Wojnarowski.
Doris, you had reason to believe that you needed to get a test for the coronavirus.
Right. Well, let's just start with the headline, which is I did test positive for COVID-19. I was so tired from Saturday the 14th through Tuesday, March 17th. I kid you not, I could not be out of bed for 5 minutes without needing to go back to bed and lay down.
Search the Woj Pod to listen.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Tuesday, May 26, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Global equities climb as states across the country reopen.
The UK, Japan, and Hong Kong announced plans to restart their economies.
Vaccine efforts in Maryland and Japan take a step forward.
And increased tensions between the U.S. and China show no sign of slowing.
New York's Mid-Hudson region begins Phase 1 reopening today, plus protests in New Jersey against the lockdown. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower, and sports good news on Patrick Ewing's recovery from coronavirus, and baseball will today make a pitch to the players.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by SEI. Asset managers don't get results that are off the charts when their solutions are off the shelf. Learn how SEI's operating platform can turn infrastructure into a competitive advantage at SEIC.com/IMS.
And U.S. futures are gaining to start the week. 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 57 points this morning. Dow futures up 522. NASDAQ futures up 179. The DAX in Germany is up 0.75%. The CAC in Paris is up 1.4%, and the FTSE 100 up 1.6%. Nikkei 225 in Japan jumped more than 2.5%, while the Hang Seng in Hong Kong was up 1.9%. 10-year Treasury down 10/30 seconds, yield 0.69%. Yield on the 2-year, 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil up 2.2% or 72 cents at $33.97 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.6% or $9.80 at $17.43.80 an ounce. The euro 1.0961 against the dollar. The yen is at 107.76. Nathan.
And Karen, those gains in stocks come as states across the country continue to reopen. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with the latest. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Nathan. Orange County in California has gained approval to reopen restaurants and malls. The state is also opening up religious facilities while limiting attendance to 25%. In Minneapolis, Mayor Jacob Fry is concerned about reopening churches, calling it a recipe for a public health disaster.
We want to look out for our neighbors. We want to look out for our family. And we recognize while that I myself may not be particularly high risk, there are others who we want to help that are.
The daily count of U.S. COVID-19 cases continues to level off, with new infections trailing the weekly average for a third straight day. Still, Coronavirus Task Force Coordinator Deborah Birx sticks to her forecast for as many as 240,000 fatalities.
It's difficult to count at the early part of the epidemic, and we will have time to look back and really ensure that we found all of those cases.
To date, the U.S. death toll from the virus stands at more than 98,000. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. S&P futures are up 58 points or 2% as the push to reopen gathers steam. Eleanor Cree is a strategist at Saxo Capital Markets.
There's a lot of optimism right now embedded in risk asset pricing, but it's actually very hard to, I think, predict the impact on human behavior that this pandemic will have. And that is going to play a crucial role in both the speed and shape of the recovery.
Since its March 23rd low, the S&P 500 has gained more than 30%.
Stocks in Asia posted strong gains overnight as Japan and Hong Kong pushed to reopen. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. Japanese stocks led gains as the world's third largest economy reopened. Markets also rising in mainland China, South Korea, Taiwan and Hong Kong, which saw some stabilization following the weekend unrest. In Australia, the ASX 200 recording its largest one-day jump in nearly 7 weeks, up almost 3% in Sydney. And here in Singapore, stocks and the dollar advanced as the Lion City averted a deeper than expected first quarter economic slump. In Singapore, Juliet Saleh, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thank you. In the UK, the government plans to reopen business as soon as next week. Bloomberg's Ewan Potts joins us live from London with the very latest. Good morning, Ewan.
Good morning, Karen and Nathan. England's outdoor markets and car showrooms will be able to reopen from June the 1st if they meet guidelines to protect shoppers and workers. Prime Minister Boris Johnson also says that non-essential stores will reopen from June 15th. That's if the government can continue to control the spread of the virus. With millions of people unemployed or furloughed, Johnson is urging Britons to go out and spend money when the restrictions are lifted. Live in London, I'm Ewan Potts, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Ewan, thank you. We have some movement in the search for a coronavirus vaccine. Novavax has begun human testing of its vaccine and anticipates early results in July. If those prove promising, the Gaithersburg, Maryland-based company will quickly move to a second phase of tests. Shares are up 20% in early trading.
In Japan, shares of Anges surged as its vaccine candidate moves closer to human trials. The Nikkei reports it'll begin clinical studies in July. Animal trials conducted since March confirmed an increase in antibodies.
Meantime, the World Health Organization is halting tests on hydroxychloroquine. The move comes over safety concerns after a study linked the drug to an increased risk of death and heart conditions. Here's the Director General of the WHO.
The review will consider data collected so far in the Solidarity trial, and in particular, robust randomized available data to adequately evaluate the potential benefits and harms from this drug.
President Trump has touted hydroxychloroquine as an effective treatment for coronavirus. The safety concerns come just days after the president said he completed his treatment with the drug.
While economies around the world reopen their doors, we're seeing tensions between the U.S. and China continue to tighten. The rhetoric kicked up another notch over the weekend. And here with details is Bloomberg's Mark Mills.
China pushed back against the blacklisting of 33 of its firms by the U.S. The Foreign Ministry described the restrictions on access to American technology as interference in Chinese internal affairs. Mark Hayfele, Global Chief Investment Officer at UBS Wealth Management, says that while there are tensions between the U.S. and China, both countries have reasons to keep things in check.
It is in neither China nor the U.S.'s interest to escalate an economic conflict at this time.
China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi warned that some in America were pushing relations to a new Cold War. Mark Mills, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Mark. Meantime, tensions ramping up between Hong Kong and China with fresh protests against new national security laws. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam is defending the measures, rejecting criticism from foreign governments. This is Bloomberg. At 5:07 on Wall Street, it is time to check the latest world and national news. For that, we turn to Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Businesses in New York's Mid-Hudson region are ready for Phase 1 reopening today. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says that the region, which includes Westchester and Rockland counties, had met the criteria for the decline in the number of deaths from COVID-19. Businesses that can resume in Phase 1 include construction and retail curbside pickup. Cuomo also says New York has a plan to honor the fallen who served in the battle against the coronavirus. The families of first responders and transit workers who lost their lives to COVID-19 will now be able to apply for government-backed benefits.
I have such respect and esteem for what they did. And I want to make sure that we repay that.
Cuomo, during his Memorial Day news briefing on board the Intrepid Sea Air Museum, says COVID-19 deaths in New York dropped below 100 for the second time in a week. Governor Phil Murphy says New Jersey will issue guidelines on indoor activities sooner than later, such as houses of worship and daycare.
When you talk about indoors, lack of ventilation, close proximity, gyms, listen, I want to get them open again as much as the next guy, but we're not there yet. I want to do it responsibly, and I don't want to kill anybody.
It comes as there was a protest march at New Jersey's Point Pleasant Beach this holiday weekend, pushing for reopening. In Connecticut, the death toll is around 3,700 from the virus. In general, the number of patients hospitalized continues to steadily decline. However, the State Department of Public Health says Connecticut broke a string of 19 days of hospitalization, with a slight rise of 5 yesterday. The U.S. will prohibit the entry of most non-U.S. citizens arriving from Brazil, where coronavirus cases are spiked to the second highest in the world. The order begins on Friday. Authorities in Connecticut, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania are searching for a college student believed to have killed 2 people last Friday. The FBI is joining the manhunt for University of Connecticut senior Peter Manfredonia, last seen near East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. Michael Dolan is a lawyer for his family, and he's pleading for the 23-year-old to turn himself in.
Nobody wants any harm to come to you. It is time to let the healing process begin. It's time to surrender.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. It's 5:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Good morning, John Stashauer.
All right, good morning, Nathan. We continue to seemingly move closer to the return of major team sports. The NBA Board of Governors will meet virtually on Friday. We may learn then the details of when, where, and how the NBA gets back to business. The NHL expected to soon begin workouts in small groups. The Players Association approved the plan for a 2014 playoff. And baseball is expected today to deliver a new economic proposal to the union. A lot of pushback to the reported idea of a 50-50 split of revenue. The Tampa Bay Rays and Houston Astros have both begun voluntary workouts. All this as virus cases, of course, continue. We just learned about Hall of Famer Patrick Ewing, the Knicks' all-time leading scorer, now the coach of Georgetown. Ewing spent the weekend at the hospital, but his son says he's now recovering from the virus at home. Well, we know how Tom Brady spent his Sunday, struggling for the most part on the golf course in the rain in Florida, playing with Peyton Manning, Tiger Woods, and Phil Mickelson. Social media had a field day when Brady put a shot in the water, had a chip that barely moved, but on the 7th hole, his wedge shot went in for a birdie, and that meant Brooks Koepka had to pay off $100,000. Woods and Manning won by a shot, and Brady and crew helped raise $20 million.
It's really just a unique moment in time. And I think the ability to do good and help others is at the core of what this was all about. And the fact that, look, I get an opportunity to go play golf with 3 of the guys that I've always looked up to in sports is something I certainly, couldn't turn down.
A cable record, nearly 6 million tuned in. That's more viewers than what they get for early rounds of majors. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
All right, John, thanks. As we come back from the Memorial Day holiday weekend, it is risk on in the markets. S&P futures higher by 60 points. Dow futures up 554. NASDAQ futures up 188 points. 10-year down 12/30 seconds. Yield 0.69%. Yield on the 2-year 0.18%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
What's the true value of your custodial relationship? Ben Harrison of BNY Mellon's Pershing explains.
As sophisticated investors demand more from their advisors, advisory firms, in turn, need to rely on their custodian to help them grow their complex businesses. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, supporting the rapid growth of RIAs is our #1 priority. We understand what it means to deliver true value to our clients who are looking for a custodian that is aligned with their best interest and delivers high-value solutions, all in an open architecture environment with flexibility, choice, and transparency. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength, resiliency, and high-touch service that BNY Mellon Pershing provides. When you work with Pershing, we put your business first. Can your custodian say that?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Pershing Advisor Solutions, LLC. Member FINRA SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak a new language?
Thanks to National Lottery Players, South Denbighshire Community Partnership are now delivering Hot Wheels to elderly people in the community like Bob and Sarah.
Thank you.
And £600 million of National Lottery funding is on its way to thousands more local projects across the UK during these exceptional times.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Life isn't always easy at the moment. We can feel frustrated, miss loved ones, or get anxious. But there are simple things we can all do to look after our mental well-being at this time. Every Mind Matters will get you started with personalised tips and advice from the NHS. Whether it's dealing with stress, techniques to help you relax, or simple tips for better sleep, we'll help you find what's right for you. Search Every Mind Matters today.
Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
Our next guest says that Australia mustn't waste its once-in-a-generation opportunity to reform the economy. Deloitte Access Economics lead partner Christian Colding joins us now. In what ways would you hope that the Prime Minister and his cabinet would put forward new policies in this post-pandemic era?
I think it's important to consider speed in particular and jobs in particular. We are still very much in the midst of a significant recession. And so any immediate reform agenda should focus on how we get out of this current crisis. In doing so, I particularly like to focus on, I think it's job maker that he's calling it. So focus on reskilling and retraining people to make sure that we target the unemployment rate and get that down as soon as possible. From another perspective, it's going to be very important that we do put through some serious demand-side stimulus in the next 6 months or so to really support the recovery. In doing so, I particularly like the opportunity to invest in more local and smaller pieces of infrastructure upgrades. Now, that could very well be through local councils. The important thing is that it is job-creating infrastructure upgrades at the local level, which is going to be able to be very neatly place-based and also deployed rapidly so that we can recover from the current crisis.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks are rising along with U.S. stock index futures as further moves to ease coronavirus lockdowns in major economies help to offset concern of escalating geopolitical tensions. The dollar slipping for a second session. Oil advancing past $34 a barrel in New York on hopes the market may rebalance after historic output cuts. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 61 points this morning. Dow futures up 558 and NASDAQ futures up 191. They're all up more than 2%. The DAX in Germany is up 0.9%. 10-year Treasury down 11.30 seconds, yield 0.69%. The yield on the 2-year 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil is up 2.6% or 86 cents at $34.12 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.5% or $9.50 at $17.44 an ounce. The euro 1.0972 against the dollar. The yen 107.75. It was a busy day, or will be, for economic data. We get a couple of reports on home prices at 9 o'clock Wall Street time. At 10, it's new home sales and consumer confidence. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Parts of the U.S. are trying to reopen during the coronavirus pandemic. Bloomberg's John Tucker in New York has more in this live report.
And Michael, the daily rise in U.S. cases trailed the weekly average for a third straight day as coronavirus deaths inched closer to 100,000. Novavax started human tests of its coronavirus vaccine candidate and anticipates providing a first look in July at what sort of immune responses are generated. The state of California is limiting attendance at church services to 100 people. The mayor of Minneapolis says he's concerned by Minnesota state guidelines taking effect tomorrow that let churches resume services. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thank you very much, John. President Donald Trump threatened to move the Republican National Convention from North Carolina unless the state's Democratic governor guarantees the party will be allowed full attendance regardless of coronavirus restrictions. The convention is scheduled for the end of August. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks for coming up on 520 on Wall Street. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak, and we're joined now by Patrick Armstrong, Chief Investment Officer at Plurimi Wealth. Patrick, it does seem like we have a lot of tailwinds in the market this morning with positive developments on the vaccine front and economies reopening. Do you think it's enough to keep the rally going?
Definitely, it's going to be going today anyway, with where the futures are. For me, I think the market, if you look at it year to date, the sectors that have been the big performers are technology, healthcare, sectors that are sort of immune to what's happening with the pandemic. But over the last 5 days, you've seen a real rotation into the more cyclical stocks. You've seen some of the banks rally, even leisure companies, airline companies going up today. And I actually think the market's right on the first instance, that those sectors that have less headwinds from the pandemic, I think are the ones that I'm still preferring at this point. You can see the relief rally, the short covering, probably pushing up these sectors. But as we get to reopening, it's not a full reopening. And I think the business models are challenged in these sectors, and the debt in these sectors is also a significant headwind. And we're probably going to get back to a 90% economy where nothing is really at capacity the way it was. So I still prefer the sectors that are outperforming year to date rather than the ones that are outperforming over the last month. And I think that's probably where the market's getting a bit too euphoric right now.
So are you steering clear of cyclicals entirely right now?
We don't have that many cyclicals. We've got some consumer cyclicals. We own Lululemon, for example. We own Best Buy. These are companies we think that have some sort of dependable profit margins. They're not overly indebted. We don't have any positions in banks right now. We don't have any industrial positions. So we've got some cyclicality in our portfolio, but not the heavily indebted industrials, and we don't have airlines, things like that.
Well, apart from the tech names, where do you see opportunity in this market right now?
I still like the healthcare names. They're getting more expensive, but they've got significant dividends. The business model not impaired. We own Roche, Chugai, Novo Nordisk. All of these things aren't to play on the pandemic by any means, but they aren't really impacted either. So I prefer to pay 25, 26 for a great company rather than paying 20 times earnings, which the Russell 1000 values at right now for companies that really are going to have more headwinds, probably more negative revisions in the coming quarters.
Are you looking at emerging markets at this point, especially given central bank support around the world?
Central bank support is flowing into everything. You've seen lots of credit spreads, equities, and emerging markets eventually will get there. They're probably last. We've not really added that. The Asian emerging markets, I think, is where I'd be adding rather than the commodity exporters. I think we'll probably get Asia back. You've seen the rebound in the Chinese economy already, and the U.S.-China's trade tensions are back in the fore again. But it's in no one's interest to really have that escalate out of control. So I think that's probably something we do get past. It'll be a headwind for the whole Asian region, but it's probably not something that's insurmountable. So that's where I'd be looking to allocate in emerging markets, but we haven't done that yet.
So you're not looking to tensions between the U.S. and China being something that really takes a toll on the economy heading into the second half here. You don't see that?
Well, I think the rhetoric is going to be overwhelming actually going into the second half of this year. I don't think there's going to be any real bite once we get past the election, but you can see how the Trump agenda will be to make China the bad guy, and that'll be a very strong rhetoric going into the election. China's not showing any signs of backing down on their side, so China is talking about the phase one deal getting implemented, and you can see how that's almost impossible given Chinese growth is probably just over 0% this year, and they've got to add $200 billion worth of goods to purchase from the U.S. So it's hard to see how China delivers on its phase one that it says they are working towards. But I don't think there's going to be much in the way of meaningful headwinds for the economy that come out of actual policy, but rhetoric will be strong. So I think the rhetoric will be the headwind rather than real new policy.
Appreciate you joining us this morning, Patrick. Good talking with you. That's Patrick Armstrong, Chief Investment Officer at Plurimi Wealth. And looking at the markets right now, it is most certainly risk on around the world, with S&P futures up 61 points, Dow futures ahead by 555, NASDAQ futures a gain of 188 points. Those are gains of 2% or more across the board, joining European equities higher as well this morning. 10-year is down 11/30 seconds. The yield on the 10-year Treasury note, 0.69%, and the yield on the 2-year is at 0.18%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. It'll be a new world on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. The trading floor is reopening today, but without celebratory bell ringings or IPO kickoffs. Traders will wear masks. They'll deal with new plexiglass barriers to help them stay socially distanced. Floor traders will also have to sign liability waivers to keep them from suing the stock exchange if they do become infected with COVID-19. Latin America's largest airline is filing for bankruptcy protection in New York. The Chapter 11 filing will allow LATAM Airlines to keep operating while the carrier, based in Chile, works out a way to pay creditors. And there's a new boom in RV sales now, as folks ready to hit the road after a couple of months of quarantine aren't necessarily ready to fly or stay in hotels. It can cost more than $100,000. Moves in European economies to reopen after lockdown are cheering investors here. S&P futures up 58, NASDAQ futures 180, Dow futures up 526 points. Joan Doniger, Bloomberg Radio.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
TSB believe in people helping people. That's why they've created TSB Smart Agent, a new secure way for TSB to answer your personal and business banking questions online. Find out more at tsb.co.uk. Automated service available 24/7. TSB partners available 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday to Friday.
Thanks to National Lottery players, South membership partnership are now delivering hot meals to elderly people in the community like Bob and Sarah.
Thank you.
And 600 funding is on its way. Across the UK during these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
Are you ready for the realist first-hand take of what's in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off. Without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter.
DC, what's up, my brother? Man,
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
It's a score, Malkin again. Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and we're just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news. At this hour, U.S. futures are climbing this morning as economies around the world ease lockdown measures. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with the latest. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Orange County in California has gained approval to reopen restaurants and malls. The state is also opening up religious facilities while limiting attendance to 25%. Meantime, in the U.K., outdoor markets and car showrooms can open as soon as Monday. In Asia, Japan is ending its state of emergency, and Hong Kong will further ease social distancing measures this week. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thanks. We have some movement in the search for a coronavirus vaccine. Novavax, based in Gaithersburg, Maryland, has started human testing of its vaccine and anticipates early results in July. In Japan, a candidate from Anges is moving closer to human trials.
We turn to Europe now, where a jury
expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving. not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
For the Jewish Communal Fund, Noel Spiegel, former senior partner with Deloitte & Touche and past JCF president, discusses the advantages of a donor-advised fund over a private foundation.
There's a lot involved in having a private foundation. You need to engage attorneys, you need to engage accountants, file tax returns. At JCF, all of that is done for you. You don't have to get involved in anything other than making your contribution to your fund and then determining which grants that you want to make.
A JCF fund may be opened with a minimum $5,000 contribution of cash or appreciated securities and can be used as an alternative to or together with a private foundation.
If you have a foundation, you have to list all of the contributions that you made. Potentially anybody, because the information is public, can find out exactly which organizations a foundation has made charitable contributions to.
Let JCF simplify your philanthropy and protect your privacy. Learn more about JCF's private client group at jcfny.org.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report.
I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying, all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus symptoms and testing. If you have any one of the following symptoms, a high temperature, a new continuous cough, loss of taste or smell, you can now get tested. Do not leave home for any reason other than to get tested. Find out how to get a test and how long to isolate at nhs.uk/coronavirus. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
TSB believe in people helping people. That's why they've created TSB Smart Agent, a new secure way for TSB to answer your personal and business banking questions online. Find out more at tsb.co.uk. Automated service available 24/7. TSB partners available 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday to Friday.
Thanks to National Lottery Players, South Denbighshire Community Partnership are now delivering Hot Wheels to elderly people in the community like Bob and Sarah.
Thank you.
And £600 million of National Lottery funding is on its way to thousands more local projects across the UK during these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
Get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Airbags to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Talk on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Special report, coronavirus update. Social distancing efforts over the Memorial Day weekend varied from state to state and venue to venue.
A video posted on social media from a venue at Lake of the Ozarks showed a large crowd of people drinking and partying in the pool. Party goers said temperatures were taken before entering and hand sanitizer was passed out, but social distancing tough to pull off. In Houston, similar reports.
Pictures on social media. A lot of people clustering together, no social distancing, nobody wearing a mask.
The city's mayor, Sylvester Turner, announcing over the weekend that
losses were widespread.
It is a stunningly historic moment. Your best strategy?
Is this a market that's accepted reality?
Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and this update's brought to you by SEI. Challenges highlight one's character, partnership, and resilience. At SEI, they act as one community with their clients. Go to SEIC.com/banks. Stocks rising along with U.S. stock index futures as further moves to ease coronavirus lockdowns in major economies helped offset concern of escalating geopolitical tensions. The Stocks Europe 600 index is up 1%, with travel stocks surging on reports that Germany plans to lift travel warnings for 31 European countries. The UK also announced steps toward getting back to business, sending the pound up by the most in almost a month. And we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 57 points this morning. Dow futures up 514. NASDAQ futures up 177. The DAX in Germany's up 0.7%. 10-year Treasury down 11/30 seconds. Yield 0.69%. Yield on the 2-year 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil up 2.3% or 77 cents at $34.02 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.7% or $12.90 at $17.40 an ounce. The euro 1.0963 against the dollar. British pound 1.2320 and the yen 107.69. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, the coronavirus has killed more than 98,000 people in the U.S. It comes as President Trump threatened to move the planned Republican National Convention from North Carolina unless the state's governor guarantees the party will be allowed full attendance regardless of coronavirus restrictions. President Trump took aim at Governor Roy Cooper, a Democrat, on Twitter. On a subdued Memorial Day during the coronavirus, President Trump laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier in Virginia. Presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden came out from his Delaware home for the first time in 2 months to lay a wreath at a nearby Veterans Memorial Park. Bad weather is threatening to delay SpaceX's first astronaut launch. The SpaceX rocket is scheduled to blast off tomorrow from Florida, carrying a Dragon capsule with NASA astronauts to the International Space Station. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael, thank you. It is now 5:49 on Wall Street. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Good morning. I'm John Tucker. Right now, we're joined by Bloomberg Chief Asia Economics Correspondent Enda Curran, live from Hong Kong, to give us an update on the brewing tension between Hong Kong and China, plus the tensions tightening between the U.S. and Beijing. Enda, good morning to you. We have scenes reminiscent of last year's unrest in Hong Kong. Can you tell us about the protests that have been taking place there?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you know, the backstory is that Beijing is pushing ahead with a controversial new national security law for Hong Kong. They say it's necessary to target sedition or people advocating secession and so on. But of course, critics in Hong Kong say it will mean an erosion of civil liberties, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, the press, and of course will undercut judiciary. So it's pretty controversial move, and we did then, as a result of that, have protests back on the streets on Sunday. We had clashes between the protesters and the police in a popular key retail district of Hong Kong, actually, Causeway Bay. And so I think the whole kind of narrative is that with this controversial law being put on the table by Hong Kong, by Beijing, and all of the concerns that go with that, most people here now expect ongoing and sustained protests over the coming weeks and months ahead. And in fact, we're expecting more tomorrow and through June when there are key anniversaries for the protest movement.
Do we have any better idea what the national security laws actually are? It seems a little vague to me.
Yep, it is vague at the moment, and we don't have explicit details because they've yet to publish a text, at least in public. And this is one of the points that the business community are making, and of course the civil liberties activists, that we don't yet know what's in it. The American Chamber here has said it's vague, and they've called for an explanation on the details. And of course there are those who say the fact that it's vague in and of itself is quite concerning, because that means it could have an even wider remit than first anticipated, rather than something that's very narrowly codified. So I think there are significant concerns. It is expected to pass the National People's Congress phase this week. That meeting in Beijing wraps up on Thursday, and after that, then it has to go through a few more hurdles in Beijing before it becomes law in Hong Kong. And then, of course, the other shoe will have to drop. We have to see how the US responds. Remember, they've promised to retaliate. That will also be a key development.
Okay, are there indications China could openly intervene at this point or retaliate against criticism from other countries, including in the United States?
Well, look, there's no doubt that Hong Kong itself does seem to have got itself caught up in the middle of this of the simmering tension now between the US and China itself. And Hong Kong has become useful on both sides. For China, it's a way of expressing their sovereignty. It's a way of expressing their force over this territory, which has, of course, been promised significant autonomy until 2047. And of course, for Washington, Hong Kong is a useful opportunity for the China hawks to back up their argument that China is engaged in overreach and isn't observing human rights and so on. So Hong Kong is caught in the middle of that, and that scenario isn't going to change anytime soon. I would say, though, that there are other tensions beyond Hong Kong. There are, of course, tensions with Taiwan that we're very familiar with. There's ongoing tensions recently in the South China Sea, and watch the India-China border as well. So there are many fronts right now where China is on the front foot.
And thanks a lot. We appreciate it. And Curran, live from Hong Kong, where it's just before 6 o'clock in the evening there. Thank you very much. Karen, back to you.
All right, John, thank you. It is 5:53 on Wall Street. It's time now for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
Kansas remains the only state with a remote sales tax collection requirement that does not have a small business exemption. State lawmakers refused to pass a bill that would have excluded small out-of-state sellers. Sold inferior wood as mahogany because the carpenter was unable to identify the type of wood he bought.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need on one legal research platform. Guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now another legal development we're watching includes the release of high-profile prisoners from prison due to the coronavirus. There is an unprecedented spike in requests for compassionate release